Set in New Delhi, India in 2005, a man named Prem Singh is watching his favorite TV show, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? Prem lives alone in the city while his wife and daughter reside in their village. That night, his wife calls him to ask about his well-being and inform him that their daughter is unwell. Prem advises her to keep their daughter home from school for the time being. After the call, Prem plays some music, picks up a knife and a machete, and heads to the bathroom. To his horror, he finds the corpse of a young girl with a cold, emotionless expression. Without hesitation, he begins dismembering the body. The narrative then shifts to Ram Charan Pandey, a sub-inspector working at Rajiv police station in the Shahdara district of New Delhi. Pandey is a family man with a wife and a beloved daughter. He often recalls his father's teachings about Isaac Newton's third law of motion. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Pandey believes that spending time with loved ones brings peace and happiness, just as the ruling elite use this principle of action-reaction to maintain systems of corruption, bribery, and graft. As a result, Pandey has chosen not to challenge the system, fearing he might become a victim of the powerful. One day, a distraught father reports his daughter missing, only to be chastised by Pandey for not keeping a better eye on her. Pandey dismisses the case, remarking that such disappearances are common in the area and have been occurring for years. He claims that missing children often return on their own. To placate the man, Pandey feigns concern, promising to search for his daughter. He hands the father some money and advises him to put up missing person posters. Around the police station, countless unresolved cases are evident. Meanwhile, in a village, a group of children is playing cricket. When the ball falls into a drain, a boy named Ali is sent to retrieve it. To his shock, he discovers a severed human hand and immediately reports it to the police. Pandey and his team arrive, but as usual, Pandey takes the matter lightly. He rationalizes that no one has reported a missing hand and suggests that the garbage in the drain might have come from a distant location. To dismiss public concern, Pandey thanks Ali for his alertness, gives him some money, and dismisses the hand as belonging to a monkey to prevent panic in the community. During this investigation, Pandey notices a large house next to the village, located in Sector 36. The house belongs to a prominent businessman named Bassi. In the meantime, Prem is seen peeking through a broken window of Bassi's house, watching the commotion with a sly smile. It is revealed that Bassi is Prem's employer. Bassi lives in Karnal and rarely visits the property, leaving Prem in charge of maintaining and cleaning the house. That night, while watching Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, Ali is sent by his father to buy groceries. On the way, Ali is suddenly called by Prem into a deserted alley and lured with the promise of chocolate. Ali, clearly the next victim, is immediately drugged and confined in Bassi's house. When Ali regains consciousness, he begs Prem to let him go, warning that his father, a security officer, will shoot him. Hearing this, Prem mockingly pretends to be afraid and sneers, saying that Ali's father could never kill him because such things only happen in movies. Prem then coldly explains what will happen next. Ali's parents will search for him for a few days and report his disappearance to the police. The police will investigate for a while but eventually close the case when Ali remains unfound. Over time, Ali's parents will move on, perhaps even have another child, and gradually forget about him. In other words, no one will truly care about his fate. Terrified by Prem's chilling words, Ali meets a tragic end as Prem kills him without hesitation. The story then flashes back to 1983 in the town of Chamba. Prem, who had been living with his uncle since losing his parents, helped run his uncle's small butcher shop. However, his uncle was a depraved pedophile who repeatedly abused Prem. To escape his uncle's advances, Prem often slept in the goat pen. One day, after the butcher shop closed, his uncle played music and attempted to assault him again. But this time, Prem, overwhelmed with anger and disgust, grabbed a machete and slashed his uncle's legs before brutally killing him with repeated strikes. This traumatic first killing marked the beginning of Prem's mental disturbance. Unknowingly, he became like his uncle, not only abusing children and women, but also murdering and mutilating his victims as if they were animals in his uncle's butcher shop. Prem meets his friend Chote, an ambulance driver, and confides in him about his frustration with Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. Prem complains that the show only invites stupid contestants. Despite frequently contacting the show's management to become a participant, he has never been invited. Prem is confident he could win the 5 million rupee prize if given the chance. During their meeting, Prem hands over some of Ali's organs to Chote, revealing that Chote is involved in trafficking human organs. Prem is promised payment for the organs the following week. Afterward, Prem cleans up Ali's blood in the house, flushes unsellable organs down various drains and buries others. He then replaces the family photos in the house with pictures of Basi's family, as Basi is expected to visit the house the next day. This reveals Prem's obsession with wealth and his aspiration to adopt the life of the rich. Meanwhile, in the city of Karnal, Basi is celebrating the birthday of his beloved grandchild. Shortly after, Prem calls him to report that Ali's organs have been handed over to Chote, but the payment will only arrive next week. It's revealed that Basi also shares a perverse nature similar to Prem's, and they work together. Basi then instructs Prem to arrange for a woman named Chumki to visit the following night. As she is a regular, he requests every month. At that moment, Prem is dancing joyfully to a song, and the faces of his past kidnapped and murdered victims flash across the screen as he revels in his happiness. On the other side of the story, Chumki's profession as a sex worker is encouraged by her parents, with her father acting as her pimp. Later that night, Prem calls Chumki to arrange her services as per Basi's request. 4 days later, Pandey and his family attend a cultural performance where Pandey is one of the performers. At the same time, Prem is also at the event scouting for his next victim, while his accomplice Chote waits in an ambulance nearby, ready to help Prem escape after securing his target. Backstage, while Pandey is getting ready, he is approached by Chumki's father, who demands updates on the investigation into Chumki's disappearance 4 days ago. He berates Pandey for ignoring the case, even spending his time participating in unimportant performances instead of fulfilling his duties. Chumki's father criticizes Pandey for failing to do the job he is paid for, pointing out that he would likely show sympathy if it were his own daughter who had gone missing. Hearing this, Pandey becomes enraged and lashes out at Chumki's father. He complains that he's overwhelmed by the sheer number of complaints, as his station only has 3 officers investigating cases in an area with 150,000 residents, essentially 1 officer for every 50,000 people. Pandey argues that police officers also have personal lives. In his frustration, Pandey storms onto the stage mid-performance, unwittingly exposing his grievances to the audience. After the performance, Pandey learns from his wife that their daughter, Fedu, has gone to the restroom. Suddenly anxious, Pandey recalls the numerous child abduction cases and fears for Fedu's safety. His worst fears are confirmed when he sees Fedu being drugged by a masked Prem, who then carries her toward the waiting ambulance. Fortunately, Pandey spots the scene from a distance and yells, startling Prem, who drops Fedu and flees. Chote, realizing the commotion, pretends to help Pandey's subordinate Patak rescue Fedu to avoid suspicion. Meanwhile, Pandey sprints after Prem, determined to catch him. After the near abduction of his daughter Fedu, Pandey now understands the anguish of a father losing his child. At the hospital, Fedu has regained consciousness, but Pandey's wife is furious, blaming him for failing to protect their daughter. She demands that Pandey find out who the masked man was. That same night, Pandey visits Chumki's father and instructs him to file an official report at the police station the next day so her disappearance can be formally investigated. The next day, in another part of town, a wealthy family's child named Vivan is abducted by 2 men while boarding his school bus. Vivan's disappearance quickly captures public attention, prompting Jawahar Rastogi, the police chief of the Shadara district in New Delhi, to hold a press conference. Rastogi announces that law enforcement is conducting a nationwide search for the missing boy. At the station, Pandey takes Chumki's father's statement, documenting her last known appearance, including the clothes she was wearing and her actions before disappearing. Her father explains that Chumki took her regular auto rickshaw that evening and was dropped off near Basi's house. Wasting no time, Pandey heads to Basi's house where Prem greets him. Although Prem recognizes Pandey as the man who chased him the night before, Pandey does not realize that Prem is the masked man who tried to abduct his daughter. Pandey meets Basi and starts explaining Chumki's disappearance, but Basi interrupts him, engrossed in the press conference on TV. Basi casually remarks that Jawahar Rastogi is a close friend of his, as is the Indian Home Minister. This makes Pandey uneasy, reminding him why he chose not to oppose the system of power and corruption. Basi tells Pandey that his servant Prem had already informed Chumki's father that she did not visit his house the night she went missing. Basi claims he is rarely at the property and only stays for a few days at a time. Suddenly, Chumki's father barges in, angrily accusing Basi of kidnapping and assaulting his daughter. Basi in turn shouts back, insulting Chumki's father for daring to slander him. He further reveals that Chumki's father had sold his daughter into prostitution and that Basi had been giving the family 30,000 rupees every month to support them. Pandey is shocked to learn of Chumki's father's exploitation of his own daughter. After Chumki's father is thrown out, Basi calls Jawahar Rastogi and complains about an idiotic inspector disrupting his breakfast. Basi hands the phone to Pandey, and Jawahar orders him to leave Basi's house immediately. Before Pandey leaves, Prem escorts him out and remarks with feigned concern about his own daughter, back in the village. Prem advises Pandey to take good care of his child, warning that the world is full of people who behave like demons. Disturbed, Pandey departs for the Shadara district police headquarters, summoned by his superior, Jawahar. At the meeting, Pandey explains that Chumki was last seen near Basi's house and that his visit was part of the investigation. However, Jawahar dismisses him, stating that all officers should be focusing on the high-profile case of Vivan's kidnapping instead of wasting time on Chumki, a mere sex worker. Jawahar argues that children in slum areas don't go missing. They are often sold by their own parents, just as Chumki was, due to financial desperation. Jawahar firmly instructs Pandey to drop the investigation into the missing slum children and focus on more productive cases like Vivan's abduction, which has garnered national attention. He emphasizes that solving cases like Vivan's is what advances police careers. Jawahar also threatens to fire Pandey if he dares to interfere with Basi again. Upon returning to the police station, Pandey finds the auto rickshaw driver who had dropped off Chumki waiting for him. The driver has also brought Chumki's phone, which shows that her last call was from Prem. The driver is immediately interrogated. Pandey then heads to the district headquarters to present the findings to Jawahar. He explains that, according to the driver, he dropped Chumki at Basi's house on the night she disappeared. 2 hours later, when the driver came to pick her up, only Prem emerged. Prem instructed the driver to dispose of Chumki's phone in a remote location, intending for the driver to claim that Chumki was last seen elsewhere. However, the driver kept the phone, complete with the original SIM card, which links Prem to Chumki's disappearance. Hearing this, Jawahar wastes no time in suspending Pandey for a few weeks. He chastises Pandey for defying orders to leave Basi alone, pointing out that arresting Prem would implicate Basi as well, a consequence Jawahar wants to avoid. Dejected, Pandey surrenders his police equipment and leaves the office. Coinciding with Pandey's suspension, Vivan is found within just 2 days, and the 2 kidnappers are also apprehended. A few weeks later, Pandey discreetly observes Basi's house from a distance and spots Prem speaking with Chot, seemingly engaged in some kind of transaction. Prem then receives orders from Basi to retrieve footage from a handycam that had recently been used to film activities involving 2 women. Meanwhile, Pandey chats with his colleague Patak, mentioning that his suspension ends the next day and he will return to duty. During their conversation, they notice Chote, who is revealed to work as an ambulance driver at a nearby hospital. Patak praises Chote for his earlier assistance in bringing Fedu to the hospital free of charge after her near abduction. However, Pandey, having seen Chote talking to Prem, realizes that Chote was likely complicit in the attempted abduction and had been planning to help Prem escape with Fedu using the ambulance. Acting swiftly, Pandey and his men kidnap Chote, torture him, and demand a confession. Terrified, Chote admits that while he was only the driver, Prem was the one who abducted and executed children. The next morning, at the district police headquarters, Jawahar has been replaced by a new superior, Bhupen, as Jawahar has been promoted following his success in solving Vivan's case. Before leaving, Jawahar exchanges a sharp glare with Pandey. Afterward, Pandey briefs Bhupen on Chumki's disappearance and the larger case of missing children in the area, implicating both Prem and Chote in these crimes. On their way to the location where Chote is being held, Bhupen reflects on the systemic issues in India, stating that he feels compelled to follow the established system. Pandey, however, replies that while he too once adhered to the system, he now acts according to his conscience. Meanwhile, convinced that Pandey would persist in investigating Chumki's disappearance, Jawahar calls a police officer named Shravan Kumar, promising him a promotion in exchange for providing updates on Pandey's activities. Jawahar also calls Basi to warn him that Pandey might continue probing the Chumki case, sharing critical information. In response, Basi orders his hitman, a senior man accompanied by two subordinates, to carry out a mission. Somehow, the hitman and his men locate the site where Chote is being held. Chote is murdered, and his body is removed from the scene. Shortly after, Pandey and Bhupen arrive at the location, only to find that Chote is missing. Enraged, Pandey berates Patak, who had been assigned to guard the site but had stepped out to get food. With their key witness lost, Bhupen authorizes Pandey to arrest Prem immediately. Pandey expresses his gratitude for the decision. Later that day, Prem is arrested and scheduled for interrogation on November 4, 2005, at 7 p.m. Instead of panicking or showing fear, Prem calmly grooms his hair and mustache, gazing at the handycam as if he were a contestant on his favorite quiz show, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? When Pandey enters, Prem smiles and casually admits to attempting to abduct Pandey's daughter, Fedu, the previous night. However, Prem refuses to answer any questions at that moment, stating that he must watch the quiz show, as the contestant has already won 5 million rupees and might win the grand prize that day. Prem enthusiastically explains that he loves the show because it allows anyone to become a millionaire in an instant, transforming their life dramatically. Recognizing Prem's disturbed mental state, Pandey seizes the opportunity to manipulate him. He promises Prem that he can watch the show if he answers all his questions. Pandey asks where Chumki is, and with a relaxed demeanor and a grin, Prem reveals that Chumki is dead. He calmly admits to killing her, and explains that the motive was to preserve her honor. When pressed for details, Prem recounts the events of that night. Prem called Chumki to Basi's residence under the pretense that someone wanted to hire her services. Prem explains that he loved Chumki and believed she reciprocated his feelings. Although he knew Chumki often slept with Basi, Prem didn't mind, convinced that she would eventually be with him as well. However, when Chumki arrived, she mocked Prem, calling him a poor servant, unaware of his status. She ridiculed his aspirations, even telling him to sleep with his own backside. Humiliated and enraged, Prem's suppressed trauma resurfaced, memories of the horrific abuse he suffered at the hands of his uncle. In his fury, he recounts how he killed and dismembered his uncle, feeding parts of the body to dogs and even consuming some of it himself. Fueled by this rage, Prem strangled Chumki with her sari for 5 to 7 minutes until she died. As if reliving the moment, Prem continues, laughing as he describes his actions. After killing Chumki, he admits to violating her corpse before cutting her body into pieces and disposing of them in separate locations. Next, Pandey asked if Prem had sold Chumki's organs to Chote. Prem replied that he hadn't, explaining that despite everything, he deeply loved Chumki. Instead of selling her organs, Prem said he consumed her flesh and continued to defile her corpse. The organs he sold belonged to children from the slums, but he also admitted to eating their flesh, approximately 22 to 24 children in total, according to him. Prem explained that he had developed a taste for human flesh after eating his uncle's meat and had since become addicted to it, consuming it regularly every few months. Hearing this horrifying confession, Pandey grew furious. However, Prem nonchalantly justified his actions, claiming that executing these children was for their own good. He argued that their organs were used to save lives and that these children, who were neglected, had no chance of a better future. In Prem's twisted mind, his actions were a way of saving them. When Bhupen asked whether Prem's employer Basi was involved in these crimes, Prem refused to answer. Prem was temporarily detained, but he grew agitated and demanded to watch Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. Recognizing Prem's mental instability, Pandey turned up the TV's volume, allowing Prem to listen to the show, which calmed him down. The next morning, following Prem's directions, the police began recovering the remains of victims from sewers and burial sites. At least 25 bodies of children and women were found, shocking both law enforcement and the local community, especially the victims' families. News of the gruesome serial killing spread rapidly, and the police searched Basi's residence, treating it as a crime scene. Shortly after, Basi was also arrested on suspicion of being involved in the case. Both Prem and Basi were transferred to Tihar jail. Enraged by the revelations, furious locals destroyed Basi's house, which is now referred to as a haunted house. The atrocities committed there, murders, sexual assaults, mutilations, and even necrophilia and cannibalism, left the community in horror and disgust. Basi's connection to the Minister of Home Affairs came into play, with the minister using his influence to secure Basi's release. Meanwhile, Pandey, who dared to challenge his superiors, was dismissed from the police force. In a related development, Bhupen was officially appointed as the Sahdara District Police Commissioner, replacing Jawahar. Jawahar, now promoted to lead the Indian Intelligence Agency, manipulated public perception by holding a press conference. In it, he claimed that Prem was the sole suspect in the case, asserting that there was no substantial evidence against Basi. Jawahar announced that his agency had filed a new charge sheet in court regarding the case. After watching Jawahar's statement on the news, Pandey called Bhupen to request permission to meet with Prem. The next day, when Pandey met with Prem, he asked if Prem's wife and child were aware of his situation. Prem replied that his family lived in a remote village where power outages were frequent. There were no proper roads, and the local phone tower had collapsed in a storm the previous month. He speculated that they might have learned about his situation from the news. Prem also mentioned that the money he earned from selling organs was always sent to his wife through Chot, delivered in installments. However, Prem was shocked when Pandey revealed that the money never reached his family because Chot had stolen it. Pandey had learned this during his interrogation of Chote, who had since disappeared without a trace. Panicked, Prem expressed his desire to return home to check on his family and ensure they received the money. He believed Basi would help secure his release. Pandey, however, explained that Basi did not care about him and had even testified in court that Prem was the sole suspect in the case. Pandey urged Prem to admit whether Basi was truly involved in the crimes. Eventually, Prem revealed the existence of a disc titled Songs of All Time that he had sent to his wife, claiming it contained evidence of Basi's involvement. That night, Pandey prepared to take a bus to visit Prem's wife. He instructed his colleague Patak to deliver a laptop to assist him in continuing his investigation into Basi and Prem. Patak warned his former boss to be cautious, as pursuing the case further could bring serious trouble. After a long journey and hitching rides with local farmers, Pandey finally arrived at Prem's wife's residence. He asked for the Songs of All Time disc. When Pandey played it, he was horrified to discover that it contained video recordings of Basi assaulting Prem's victims before they were executed. Prem's wife asked Pandey if Prem was truly guilty of these heinous crimes. To calm her, Pandey simply stated that the court was still investigating the case. As Pandey waited by the roadside for public transport, a car happened to stop and offered him a ride. Unbeknownst to him, the car was driven by the old hitman and his two accomplices, acting on Jawahar's orders. Tragically, Pandey was brutally murdered, and the Songs of All Time disc was destroyed to eliminate any evidence of Basi's involvement. 6 months later, Jawahar and his intelligence agency successfully secured Basi's release. Meanwhile, Prem was sentenced to death. Patak had taken Pandey's position in the force, revealing his full name as Shravan Kumar Pathak, the informant who had been feeding Jawahar information about Pandey in exchange for a promotion. Now in his new role, Pathak displayed arrogance toward his colleagues, particularly Bishnoi. Pandey's disappearance was marked by a poster at the police station, recognizing him as missing. In the film's conclusion, Bishnoi, at home, read a newspaper article about the old hitman and his two accomplices mysteriously escaping prison. The trio was suspected of involvement in Pandey's disappearance. Shortly after, a package arrived at Bishnoi's house. Upon opening it, he found a disc titled "More Songs of All Time." It was strongly implied that the disc had been sent by Prem's wife, seeking justice and exposing the corruption that plagued India. This film vividly portrays the deep corruption within the system and law enforcement in India. If you search online, you'll find that the number of missing children cases in India is staggeringly high every year. The film is inspired by a true story based on the infamous 2006 Nithari serial murder case that shocked India. The suspects in the case were a businessman named Moninder Singh and his servant Surinder Kohli, who were accused of murder, rape, organ trafficking, cannibalism and necrophilia. However, in 2023, Moninder Singh was acquitted due to a lack of strong evidence, while Surinder Kohli was sentenced to death. And that's it for the story series of this film. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to support this channel by subscribe, like and share. See you in the next video. Goodbye.